Picture this, a frail woman in a torn coat, wandering the busy streets with confused eyes, reaching out to strangers who pull away in disgust. They see a homeless person. They see someone to avoid. They see trash. But what if I told you that woman had $847 million sitting in bank accounts she couldn't remember? What if those same people who stepped over her, who covered their noses and rushed past, were walking away from one of the richest women in America? This isn't fiction. This is the story of Margaret Eleanor Whitmore and the 9-year-old girl who saw what everyone else missed. It's about the day a child's kindness revealed something the whole world had forgotten. That every person you pass on the street has a story, and some of those stories will break your heart and put it back together all at once. They say money can't buy happiness. But can kindness buy something even more valuable? Can a small hand reaching out in compassion unlock doors that millions of dollars had sealed shut? This is that story. And I promise you, by the end, you'll never look at a stranger the same way again. The morning sun hit the streets of downtown Chicago with that particular autumn brightness that makes everything look clean and hopeful. People rushed past each other with purpose, clutching coffee cups and checking phones, each person locked in their own world of appointments and deadlines and things that seemed urgent. Nobody had time to stop. Nobody had time to look. And that's exactly why nobody saw her. Margaret Eleanor Whitmore sat on a bench outside the Palmer House Hotel, her thin body wrapped in a coat that had once been expensive but now hung on her frame like a rag. Her silver hair, uncombed and wild, caught the morning light. Her hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, trembled as she held them in her lap. She was 78 years old, and she had no idea where she was. The confusion had started slowly, like fog rolling in from the lake. First, she forgot small things. Names of people she'd known for years. The word for that thing you use to unlock doors. Keys. That was it. Keys. But then, the fog got thicker. She would find herself in rooms and not know how she got there. She would start conversations and forget what she was saying mid-sentence. And then, one morning, 3 weeks ago, she had woken up in her penthouse apartment on Lakeshore Drive and couldn't remember who she was. The panic had been overwhelming. She had stumbled through her apartment, looking at photographs of a woman who looked like her but older, standing next to people she didn't recognize. There were awards on the walls with her name on them. Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, Businesswoman of the Year. Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, Philanthropist Award. Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, Fortune 500 CEO. But none of it meant anything. The name was just letters. The face in the photos was a stranger. She had left her apartment in her nightgown and coat, wandering into the streets because staying in that place full of strange objects and unfamiliar faces felt like drowning. She had been wandering ever since. 3 weeks of sleeping in doorways, eating from trash cans when the hunger got too bad, and asking people for help who looked at her with disgust or pity or nothing at all. Now, sitting on this bench, Margaret watched the people pass. A businessman in a suit stepped around her without looking. A mother pulled her child closer and hurried past. A group of teenagers laughed, and one of them said something about the crazy homeless lady. Margaret heard the words, but they didn't hurt anymore. She was too tired to feel hurt. She was just tired. She stood up slowly, her knees aching, and began to walk. She didn't know where she was going. She never did anymore. She just walked because staying still felt wrong, like giving up, and some part of her deep down wasn't ready to give up yet, even if she couldn't remember why. The crowds thickened as she moved deeper into the shopping district. Music played from store speakers. People carried bags full of purchases. Everything was bright and loud and overwhelming. Margaret felt her breath coming faster. Too many people. Too much noise. She needed to find somewhere quiet. She turned down a side street, looking for an escape, and that's when she stumbled. Her foot caught on an uneven piece of sidewalk, and she fell hard, landing on her hands and knees. Pain shot through her wrists. She tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't work right. She stayed there on the ground, breathing hard, feeling the rough concrete under her palms. People walked around her. She could see their shoes passing by. Expensive shoes. Clean shoes. Nobody stopped. She heard voices floating above her. Someone should call social services. Don't make eye contact. She might be dangerous. That's disgusting. They shouldn't let people like that in this neighborhood. Margaret tried to call out, to ask for help. But her voice came out as barely a whisper. She was invisible. Worse than invisible. She was something people actively didn't want to see. And then, a different pair of shoes appeared in front of her. Small shoes. Pink sneakers with butterflies on them. Margaret looked up slowly and saw a little girl staring down at her. The girl couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, with dark skin and hair pulled back in 2 puffs, wearing a purple jacket and carrying a backpack decorated with cartoon characters. "Are you okay?" the girl asked. Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just stared at this child who was the first person in days to look at her like she was human. The girl knelt down on the sidewalk, not caring that it was dirty, and reached out her small hand. "Here, let me help you up. Riley, get away from her right now." A woman's voice cut through the air, sharp with panic. A black woman in her 30s rushed over, her face tight with worry. She grabbed the little girl's arm. "I told you not to talk to strangers. Especially not. But, Mama," she fell. "She's hurt." Riley pulled against her mother's grip, her eyes still on Margaret. "That's not our problem, baby. Come on." The woman tried to pull her daughter away, but Riley planted her feet. "No, Mama. Look at her. She's scared." The mother, whose name was Teresa Johnson, looked at the old woman on the ground properly for the first time. She saw the fear in her eyes, the confusion, the way her hands were shaking. Teresa had been taught her whole life to be careful, to protect herself and her daughter, to not trust easily. Living as a black woman in America had taught her that safety meant being cautious. But she also saw something else in this old woman's face. She saw someone's grandmother, someone's mother, someone who was lost. Teresa sighed deeply and made a decision that would change all their lives. She knelt down next to her daughter, and together they helped Margaret to her feet. The old woman was lighter than she looked, all bones and fragile skin. She leaned heavily on them as they guided her to a nearby bench. "Thank you," Margaret whispered, and tears started running down her face. She didn't know why she was crying. She just was. Riley sat down next to her on the bench and, without hesitation, took Margaret's wrinkled hand in her small one. "What's your name?" Margaret opened her mouth and closed it again. What was her name? She knew it started with an M. Mary? Martha? Margaret? Yes. Margaret. Margaret, she said quietly. "I'm Riley. This is my mama, Teresa. Are you lost?" Margaret nodded. "Yes. I'm very lost." Teresa stood in front of them, her arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable, but not leaving. She looked at this old white woman and her daughter holding hands, and felt a complicated mix of emotions. Compassion, wariness, guilt for the wariness, and something else. A recognition of pain that crossed all boundaries. "Do you have family we can call?" Teresa asked gently. "Someone who's looking for you?" "I don't know," Margaret said. "I don't remember." "You don't remember if you have family?" "I don't remember anything." Margaret's voice broke. "I woke up one day and everything was gone. Who I am, where I live, all gone. I've been trying to find my way back, but I don't know where back is." Riley squeezed her hand. "That's really scary." "Yes," Margaret said, looking at this child who understood. "It's very scary." Teresa pulled out her phone. "Okay, we need to get you help. I'm going to call." "No." Margaret's voice rose in panic. "No police. No hospitals. They'll lock me away. Please. I just need to remember. I just need time to remember." "Ma'am, you need medical attention. You might have dementia or Alzheimer's, or, please." Margaret looked up at Teresa with desperate eyes. "Just give me a few days. Just let me try to remember. I know who I am. I know I'm not nobody. I'm someone. I'm someone important. I just can't remember why." Teresa looked at her daughter, who was staring up at her with those big brown eyes that could convince her to do almost anything. "Mama, can't we help her? Just for a little while." Every sensible part of Teresa's brain was screaming no. This was not her responsibility. This could be dangerous. She had her own daughter to protect, her own problems to deal with. She was a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep them in their small apartment. She couldn't take on someone else's crisis. But then, she thought about her own grandmother, who had died alone in a nursing home because Teresa had been too busy working to visit more than once a month. She thought about how guilty she still felt about that 3 years later. She thought about what kind of person she wanted her daughter to grow up to be. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay, but just for today, we'll get you cleaned up, get some food in you, and then we figure out a real plan. Understood. Margaret nodded eagerly, fresh tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. Riley clapped her hands together. She can sleep on my floor. I have sleeping bags from when Destiny came over for a sleepover. We'll figure that out later, Teresa said, already regretting this decision, but unable to take it back now. Not with her daughter looking so happy, and this old woman looking so grateful. They helped Margaret to her feet and began walking toward the bus stop. Margaret moved slowly, her body stiff and sore from weeks of sleeping rough. Other pedestrians gave them a wide berth, their eyes sliding away from the odd trio of a black woman, a little girl, and a homeless white woman. On the bus, they sat in the back. Riley continued to hold Margaret's hand, chattering about her school and her friends and her favorite TV shows. Margaret listened with a small smile on her face, letting the sound of the child's voice wash over her like medicine. Teresa watched them both, her mind racing with practical concerns. What was she going to feed this woman? Where was she really going to sleep? What if she was dangerous? What if someone reported Teresa for harboring a homeless person? But she pushed those thoughts away and focused on the immediate moment. One step at a time. That's how she'd survived everything else in her life. One step at a time. Their apartment was in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The building was old, with peeling paint and a broken intercom. But Teresa kept their small two-bedroom space clean and comfortable. As they climbed the stairs to the third floor, Margaret held the railing tightly, breathing hard with the effort. Inside, the apartment was small but filled with warmth. Photos covered the walls, showing Riley at various ages, always smiling. There were drawings taped to the refrigerator, books piled on every surface, and a worn couch that had clearly been loved for many years. Okay, Teresa said, shifting into practical mode. First things first. Margaret, when's the last time you had a real meal? Margaret thought about it. I don't know. Days, maybe. There was a soup kitchen, but the line was too long. Right. Riley, go get a clean towel and washcloth from the bathroom. Margaret, you're going to take a shower while I make some food. Then, we'll see about getting you some clean clothes. For the next hour, Teresa became a force of efficiency. She helped Margaret into the bathroom and showed her how to use the shower, leaving her one of her own old nightgowns to change into. While Margaret cleaned herself for the first time in weeks, feeling the hot water wash away layers of street grime and shame, Teresa cooked. She made scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, and oatmeal, putting together everything she thought a starving person could keep down. Riley set the table carefully, putting out the nice placemats they usually only used for holidays. She wanted Margaret to feel special. She wanted her to know she mattered. When Margaret emerged from the bathroom, clean and dressed in the simple nightgown, she looked different. Fragile still, but human. Her wet hair was combed back from her face, showing features that might have been beautiful once. Teresa could see the bone structure of someone who had been privileged, who had taken care of herself, who belonged to a different world than this tiny apartment. They sat down to eat, and Margaret cried again at the sight of the food. She ate slowly, her stomach not used to so much after weeks of deprivation. Riley chatted happily, filling the silence, while Teresa watched Margaret carefully for any signs of danger or instability. So, Teresa said after the meal was finished, let's see if we can help you remember some things. Do you remember anything at all about yourself? Any small detail? Margaret closed her eyes, concentrating. Water, she said finally. I remember water. A lot of water. And a name. Edmund. But I don't know who Edmund is. Edmund could be a husband, or a son, or a father. Teresa pulled out a notepad. What else? Numbers. I remember numbers. Columns of numbers. And meetings. Big rooms full of people in suits, listening to me talk. Margaret opened her eyes, looking frustrated. But I don't remember what I said. I don't remember who they were. That sounds like business. Maybe you were a businesswoman. Maybe. Margaret touched her face, feeling the loose skin, the wrinkles. How old am I? I'd guess late 70s, maybe. That old, Margaret said softly. I've lived a whole life I can't remember. Riley came over and hugged her. It's okay. We'll help you remember. Right, Mama? Teresa looked at her daughter's hopeful face and Margaret's desperate one and knew she was in deeper than she'd planned. But there was something about this woman, something that told Teresa this wasn't just a simple case of homelessness. There was a mystery here, a story that needed to be uncovered. Right, she agreed. We'll help. But, Margaret, tomorrow we're going to have to start making some calls. Check with missing persons. Maybe take you to a doctor. We have to do this right. Okay. Margaret agreed, too tired to argue. Tomorrow. That night, Riley insisted Margaret sleep in her room. They made up a bed on the floor with blankets and pillows, and Riley read to her from her favorite book until Margaret's eyes grew heavy. As the old woman drifted off to sleep in the warmth and safety of this stranger's home, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. In the living room, Teresa sat on her couch with her laptop, typing into search engines. Missing elderly woman Chicago. Lost billionaire. Confused senior citizen. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret was not just some random homeless person. There was something else going on here. Something bigger. Her phone buzzed. It was her sister, Cheryl. Girl, where were you today? I thought we were meeting for lunch. Sorry, something came up. You're not going to believe this, but Riley and I found this old white lady on the street, and now she's sleeping in Riley's room. You did what? I know. It sounds crazy. But, Cheryl, there's something off about this whole situation. She says she can't remember who she is, but she doesn't talk like a typical homeless person. And her hands, they're soft, like she's never done manual labor in her life. So what are you thinking? She's some rich person who wandered off from a nursing home. Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. Well, be careful. You've got Riley to think about. Morning came with the sound of Riley's alarm clock playing pop music. Margaret woke up confused for a moment, not recognizing the ceiling above her or the cartoon posters on the walls. Then, she remembered. The little girl. The kind woman. The food and shower and safety. She sat up slowly, her body aching but feeling better than it had in weeks. Riley was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed and watching Margaret with curious eyes. Good morning. Did you sleep okay? I hope I didn't snore. Mama says sometimes I snore, but I don't believe her. Margaret smiled. You didn't snore. And, yes, I slept very well. Thank you. Come on, Mama's making breakfast. She makes really good pancakes. Well, they're from a box, but she adds bananas, so they're special. In the kitchen, Teresa was already dressed for work in a uniform that said Carewell Senior Living on the shirt. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much, but she smiled when Margaret came in. How are you feeling? Teresa asked, flipping pancakes on the stove. Better. Thank you for everything. I don't know how to repay you. Don't worry about that right now. Sit down. Eat. Then, we need to talk about next steps. Teresa placed a stack of pancakes in front of Margaret, along with syrup and butter. I have to go to work soon. I work at a senior living facility, taking care of elderly residents. I'll be gone until 3. Riley has school. The question is, what do we do with you? Margaret felt panic rising in her chest. You're sending me away? No, I didn't say that. But I can't just leave you here alone in my apartment. I don't know you, and I need to keep Riley safe. I understand. Margaret looked down at her plate. I'll leave. You've already done more than enough. Hold on now. I didn't say you had to leave either. Teresa sat down across from her with a cup of coffee. Here's what I'm thinking. Today, you come with me to work. Carewell has a community room where families sometimes wait. You can stay there, and during my break, we can make some phone calls. Try to figure out who you are. Sound okay? Relief flooded through Margaret. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Riley bounced in her chair. Can I come visit after school? Absolutely not. You go to after-school program like always, do your homework, and I'll pick you up at 5. Got it. Riley turned to Margaret. The after-school program is boring, but Miss Jackson lets us paint sometimes, and that's fun. An hour later, Margaret found herself in Teresa's old car, wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit, heading toward a place she didn't know to spend a day with strangers. But somehow it felt less frightening than the streets. At least here, someone cared if she existed. Carewell Senior Living was a sprawling facility in the suburbs, clean and modern with well-kept grounds. Teresa led Margaret through the employee entrance, got her a visitor's badge, and settled her in a bright community room with magazines, a television, and comfortable chairs. "I'll check on you during my breaks," Teresa promised. "There's a vending machine down the hall if you get hungry. Try to relax, okay?" Margaret nodded and watched Teresa disappear down a hallway to start her shift. Then, she was alone with her thoughts, which wasn't always a comfortable place to be. She picked up a magazine and tried to read, but the words swam on the page. Her mind kept drifting, trying to grab onto memories that slipped away like water through her fingers. Around 10 in the morning, an old man using a walker slowly entered the community room. He was well-dressed, probably in his 80s, with kind eyes and a shock of white hair. "Hello there," he said cheerfully. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Arthur Chun. Are you visiting someone?" "Sort of," Margaret said, not sure how to explain her situation. "I'm staying here for the day, with a friend who works here." "Ah, wonderful. Mind if I join you? I was supposed to have a visitor this morning, but she canceled. My granddaughter. Always very busy with her important job." He said it without bitterness, just acceptance. "Please." Margaret gestured to the chair next to her. Arthur sat down with a grateful sigh. "These old bones don't work like they used to. I'm 91, you know. Lived through a whole century almost. Seen things change in ways I never imagined." They began to talk, and Margaret found herself relaxing. Arthur was easy to talk to, asking her questions, but not prying when she gave vague answers. He told her about his life, how he'd come to America from China as a young man with nothing but determination, how he'd built a successful import business, how he'd lost his wife 5 years ago, and still missed her every day. "The hardest part of getting old," Arthur said, "is becoming invisible. People look right through you. They think because you're old, you have nothing left to offer. But I'll tell you a secret." He leaned in conspiratorially. "We old folks have the best stories. We've lived through history. We've loved and lost and learned. We're treasures, really. But nobody wants to take the time to dig for treasure anymore." Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. "I know what you mean about being invisible. I've been invisible for weeks now." "Well, I see you," Arthur said firmly. "And whatever you're going through, remember this. It's never too late for things to change. I've seen impossible things become possible. Never give up." They talked for over an hour before a nurse came to take Arthur to his physical therapy appointment. He squeezed Margaret's hand before he left. "Come visit me again. Room 217. I'm always there, and I rarely have visitors. It would be nice to have a friend." "I will," Margaret promised, meaning it. After he left, Margaret sat thinking about what he'd said. About being invisible. About being treasure. She touched her face again, feeling the unfamiliar contours, trying to remember the person who lived behind this old skin. At lunchtime, Teresa appeared with a sandwich from the cafeteria and a determined look on her face. "Okay, I talked to my supervisor, and she's letting me use the office computer during my lunch break. We're going to do some serious searching. Come on." In a small office filled with filing cabinets and photos of smiling residents, Teresa pulled up a browser and started typing. "Let's start with missing persons reports in Chicago. If someone's looking for you, that's where they'd start." She scrolled through pages of faces and names. Men, women, young, old, each one representing someone's missing loved one. But none of them were Margaret. "Okay, not there. Let's try news stories about missing elderly women. More searching. More faces. Nothing. What about rich people?" Margaret said suddenly. "You said my hands look like I never worked. What if I was rich?" "Rich people don't usually end up homeless," Teresa said. But she typed in new search terms anyway. Chicago billionaires. Chicago millionaires. Chicago businesswomen. Pages loaded. Articles about various wealthy people in the city. And then, Teresa stopped scrolling. "Oh my God," she whispered. On the screen was a photo from a business magazine, dated 8 months ago. The headline read, "Margaret Eleanor Whitmore steps down as CEO of Whitmore Industries after 40 years at the helm." The photo showed a woman in an elegant business suit, silver hair perfectly styled, standing in front of a wall of windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The resemblance to the woman sitting next to Teresa was unmistakable, despite the weight loss and rough appearance. Margaret leaned forward, staring at the screen. "That's me," she whispered. "That's me. I'm Margaret Eleanor Whitmore." Teresa's hands shook as she clicked on the article. Oh my God. Oh my God. Do you know who you are? Margaret, you're one of the richest women in America. It says here you're worth over $800 million. I'm worth what? Margaret felt dizzy. Teresa kept reading, her voice rising with excitement and disbelief. You founded Whitmore Industries 35 years ago, started with one small manufacturing plant, and built it into an empire. You own property all over the country. You've donated millions to charity. You're on the boards of half a dozen major corporations. Margaret, you're famous. You're a legend in the business world. But I don't remember any of that. Margaret touched the screen, looking at the confident woman in the photo. That's me, but it's not me. I don't feel like that person. Teresa kept scrolling, finding more articles. And then she found something that made her stomach drop. A small news story from 3 weeks ago, buried in the business section. Concerns grow for missing business icon Margaret Whitmore. The 78-year-old billionaire was last seen leaving her Lake Shore Drive penthouse 3 weeks ago. Her assistant, Daniel Morrison, reported her missing after she failed to show up for a board meeting and did not respond to calls. Police are investigating but say Whitmore's recent diagnosis of early-stage Alzheimer's disease may be a factor in her disappearance. Alzheimer's, Margaret repeated. That's what's wrong with me. Margaret, people have been looking for you. Your family, your business associates, everyone. There's been a whole investigation. Teresa pulled out her phone. We need to call someone. The police. Your company. We need to tell them you're safe. Wait. Margaret grabbed Teresa's hand. Just wait. Please. I need a minute to process this. Margaret, you're a billionaire. You've been living on the streets for 3 weeks when you could have been in your own home. We need to get you help. I know. But just give me a minute. Margaret stared at the articles, at the photos of this powerful woman she was supposed to be. I don't feel like her. I don't feel like someone who's worth $800 million. I feel like a lost old woman who can't remember her own name. But you are her. You're Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. You built an empire. You changed industries. You employed thousands of people. Teresa pointed at the screen. Look, it says here you came from nothing. Your father was a factory worker. Your mother was a seamstress. You put yourself through community college while working 3 jobs. You started your first business with money you saved from working overtime for 5 years. You did all that. That strength is still inside you. Margaret felt something shift inside her. A small spark of recognition. Of pride. Yes, she had done those things. She couldn't remember the details, but she could feel the truth of it. She had been strong. She had been determined. Maybe she could be again. Okay, she said. Okay, let's make the call. Teresa searched for contact information and found a general number for Whitmore Industries. Her hand shook as she dialed. A receptionist answered. Yes, hello. My name is Teresa Johnson. I'm calling because I believe I've found Margaret Whitmore. There was a pause. Then, ma'am, if this is some kind of prank, it's not a prank. She's here with me right now. She's been missing for 3 weeks. She's safe, but she needs help. Hold, please. The hold music seemed to last forever. Teresa and Margaret looked at each other, both terrified and excited. Then, a man's voice came on the line, sharp with urgency. This is Daniel Morrison, Mrs. Whitmore's executive assistant. Who is this? Where is she? Is she hurt? She's okay. She's with me at Carewell Senior, living on Elmwood Avenue. She was on the streets. She has memory problems. We found her yesterday. Keep her there. Don't let her leave. I'm sending security and a car right now. 20 minutes. Can you stay with her for 20 minutes? Yes. But, listen, she's fragile right now. Don't come in with a bunch of people scaring her. She's been through trauma. I understand. Thank you. Thank you for keeping her safe. His voice cracked with emotion. We've been so worried. You have no idea. After she hung up, Teresa looked at Margaret. They're coming. 20 minutes. Will you stay with me? I don't want to be alone when they get here. Of course. Riley, and I will stay with you as long as you need us. Riley. Margaret smiled through her tears. That little girl saved my life. She saw me when everyone else looked away. How do I thank her for that? You just did, Teresa said softly. They went back to the community room to wait. Arthur was there, having finished his therapy. When he saw Margaret's face, he wheeled his walker over quickly. What's wrong? Are you okay? I just found out who I am, Margaret said. Turns out I'm a billionaire. Arthur laughed. Well, what do you know? I told you we old folks were treasures. I just didn't know how literal I was being. They sat together, the three of them, waiting for Margaret's old life to come crashing back in. Margaret felt terrified and relieved and grateful all at once. She held Teresa's hand on one side and Arthur's on the other, drawing strength from these two people who barely knew her but had shown her kindness anyway. Right at 20 minutes, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. Men in suits got out, along with one older gentleman who rushed inside like his life depended on it. That was Daniel Morrison. Teresa recognized him from photos online. Daniel stopped in the doorway of the community room, staring at Margaret with tears streaming down his face. Oh, thank God. Thank God you're alive. Margaret stood up slowly. Do I know you? It's Daniel, Mrs. Whitmore. I've worked for you for 15 years. I've been searching for you every day. Every single day. He came closer, moving slowly so as not to frighten her. We've all been so worried. I'm sorry, Margaret said. I don't remember you. I don't remember anything. That's okay. We'll work on that. The important thing is you're safe. He turned to Teresa. Are you the woman who called? Yes. Teresa Johnson. You saved her life. You know that, right? 3 weeks on the streets with her condition. She could have died. We had investigators searching everywhere, but they were looking in shelters and hospitals, not out in the open. He pulled out a checkbook. How much can I pay you? Name any number. Teresa stepped back. I don't want money. Please. You deserve a reward. Anything you want. I said I don't want money. Teresa's voice was firm. We helped because it was the right thing to do. That's all. Daniel looked shocked. In his world, everything had a price. Everyone wanted something. But this woman was refusing payment like it was an insult. Margaret spoke up. Teresa has a daughter. Riley. She's 9. It was Riley who first stopped to help me. She took my hand when everyone else walked by. Then, let me set up a trust fund for her education. Please. College. Graduate school. Whatever she needs. Teresa opened her mouth to refuse again, but Margaret interrupted. Let me do this. Please. For Riley. She gave me back my life. Let me give her a future. Teresa looked at Margaret's pleading face and thought about Riley's dreams of becoming a doctor. Thought about the student loans she was still paying off from her own 2 years at community college. Thought about giving her daughter opportunities she'd never had. Okay, she said quietly. For Riley. Thank you. Daniel made a note on his phone. Consider it done. Now, Mrs. Whitmore, we need to get you to a hospital. Dr. Patel has been on standby, waiting to examine you. I want Teresa and Riley to come with me, Margaret said suddenly. To the hospital. They're my friends. I trust them. Of course. Whatever you need. Daniel looked at Teresa. Can you come? Is that possible? Teresa thought about her shift, about Riley at school, about all the responsibilities pulling at her. But she looked at Margaret's frightened face and made her decision. Let me call my supervisor and arrange some things. Give me 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes turned into a whirlwind. Teresa talked to her supervisor, who was surprisingly understanding. She called Riley's school and explained there was an emergency, arranging for her to stay in the after-school program until Teresa could pick her up. She called her sister Cheryl and asked her to get Riley and bring her to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Then, they were loading into one of the SUVs, Margaret wrapped in a blanket someone had provided, Teresa sitting next to her, Daniel, and security team members surrounding them. Margaret kept hold of Teresa's hand the whole drive, afraid that if she let go, this kind woman would disappear and she'd be alone again. At the hospital, they were whisked to a private floor where Dr. Patel, a neurologist who specialized in memory disorders, was waiting. The media had somehow gotten wind that Margaret had been found, and security had to hold back reporters in the lobby. The examination took hours. Scans, tests, questions Margaret couldn't answer. Dr. Patel was gentle but thorough, explaining everything he was doing. Teresa waited in a private waiting room, watching news coverage of Margaret's return on the television mounted on the wall. The news anchors called it a miracle. They showed photos of Margaret before, powerful and poised, and speculated about what had happened during her missing weeks. They interviewed business analysts about the future of Whitmore Industries. They talked about her as if she was a symbol, not a person. Riley arrived with Aunt Cheryl around 6 in the evening, running into the waiting room and throwing her arms around her mother. Mama, is Margaret okay? Did she really remember who she is? She's okay, baby. The doctors are checking her out now. Is it true she's a billionaire? Aunt Cheryl showed me on her phone. There are articles about her everywhere. It's true. Wow. Riley's eyes went wide. And I held her hand. I held a billionaire's hand. You held a scared woman's hand. Teresa corrected. That's what matters. Money doesn't make someone important. Treating people with kindness does. An hour later, Dr. Patel emerged from the examination room. His face was serious, but not grim. Mrs. Whitmore is asking for you, he said to Teresa. And she wants to meet Riley. They followed him down the hall to a private room where Margaret was sitting up in bed, looking small in a hospital gown, and four in her arm providing fluids and nutrients her body desperately needed. But she smiled when she saw Riley. You must be Riley. Yes, ma'am. Riley approached the bed shyly. Are you feeling better? Much better. Thanks to you. Margaret held out her hand, and Riley took it, just like she had on the street. I'm told you were the first person to stop and help me. You looked scared. I don't like when people are scared and alone. You're a very special girl. Your mother should be proud. I am, Teresa said softly. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore has moderate to 2 days later. Margaret was released from the hospital with a team of specialists managing her care and a pharmacy's worth of medications to help slow the disease's progression. Daniel Morrison had arranged everything with military precision. The penthouse on Lakeshore Drive had been prepared with new security systems, medical equipment, and a full staff of nurses rotating on 8-hour shifts. But Margaret refused to go back there. I don't remember that place, she told Daniel as they sat in her hospital room, finalizing arrangements. It's not home. Home is where you feel safe. I felt safe with Teresa and Riley. Mrs. Whitmore, that's very kind, but you can't live in a 2-bedroom apartment in that neighborhood. It's not appropriate for someone of your stature. Why not? Because I have money? Money didn't help me when I was lost on the streets. Money didn't stop me from eating from trash cans. But a little girl with a kind heart stopped everything to help. That's worth more than all my millions. Daniel sighed. He'd worked for Margaret long enough to know when she'd made up her mind. What are you suggesting? I want to buy a house. A good house in a good neighborhood. I want Teresa and Riley to live there with me. I'll pay Teresa a salary to be my companion and help coordinate my care. Riley can go to the best schools. And I won't be alone. Mrs. Whitmore, you barely know these people. I know they're good people. That's enough. But what if they're taking advantage of you? What if they're only interested in your money? Margaret laughed. Teresa refused a reward for saving my life. She only accepted money for Riley's education when I begged her. If she was after my money, she's doing a terrible job of it. Still, we should do background checks. Have lawyers draw up contracts. Protect your interests. Fine. Do your background checks. But don't insult them while you're doing it. And make sure the contracts are fair. I won't have Teresa feeling like an employee in her own home. Daniel made notes, his mind already spinning through the logistics. This is highly unusual. Good. My whole life has been about doing things differently. Why stop now? When Daniel presented the proposal to Teresa that evening, calling her at home after Riley had gone to bed, she nearly dropped the phone. She wants what? Mrs. Whitmore wants to purchase a house where she can live with you and your daughter. She's offering you a position as her companion with a salary of $150,000 a year, plus full benefits and housing. Teresa sat down hard on her couch. $150,000. She made $32,000 at her current job, and that was after the small raise she'd gotten last year. $150,000 was life-changing money. It was stability, security, the ability to give Riley everything she'd ever dreamed of. Why would she do this for us? She trusts you. In her current state, trust is more valuable than anything. She needs people around her who care about her as a person, not as a bank account. But I'm not qualified to care for someone with Alzheimer's. I work in a senior facility, but I'm just an aide, not a nurse. You wouldn't be her primary caregiver. We'd have professional nurses for that. You'd be her companion, someone she knows and trusts, someone to help her feel safe and comfortable. Plus, frankly, we think having Riley around would be good for her mental health. Studies show that interaction with children can help Alzheimer's patients maintain cognitive function longer. Teresa's mind raced. I need to think about this. I need to talk to Riley. This is a big decision. Of course. Take the weekend. We'll need to do background checks anyway. I apologize for that, but it's standard procedure when someone is in Mrs. Whitmore's position. I understand. After hanging up, Teresa sat in the dark living room of her small apartment. Her mind went to all the things that money could buy. A good school for Riley. New clothes that weren't from thrift stores. A car that didn't break down every 3 months. No more working double shifts. No more choosing between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. But it also meant completely changing their lives. Living with a stranger. Being responsible for someone with a serious medical condition. Giving up the independence they'd fought so hard to maintain. The next morning, she sat Riley down and explained the offer. Riley's eyes grew wider with each detail. So we'd live in a big house? With Margaret? Yes. But, baby, this is serious. Margaret is sick. Her brain doesn't work right anymore. She's going to get worse over time. That's going to be hard to watch. Hard to deal with. And it's a big responsibility. But she'd have nurses, right? You said she'd have nurses. Yes, professional nurses. I'd mainly be there to keep her company. Help her feel comfortable. Riley thought about this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. I like Margaret. She's nice. And she was so scared when we found her. I don't want her to be scared again. I think we should help her. This isn't just about helping her, though. This is about changing our whole life. I know. But, Mama, you're always tired. You work so much, and you're always worried about money. This would make things easier, right? Out of the mouths of babes. Teresa pulled her daughter into a hug. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't notice because I'm short. They laughed together, and Teresa made her decision. She called Daniel back and accepted the offer. The background checks came back clean. Of course they did. Teresa had never even gotten a parking ticket. The lawyers drew up contracts that were generous and fair. And, within 2 weeks, they were standing in front of a beautiful Victorian house in Oak Park, one of Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods. The house had been built in the 1920s and recently renovated. It had 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a modern kitchen with an island bigger than Teresa's old bedroom, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a backyard with a garden and a tree with branches perfect for climbing. It was the kind of house Teresa had only ever seen in magazines. What do you think? Margaret asked nervously. She'd come with them for the viewing. Leaning on a cane now, one of the nurses hovering nearby, just in case. It's too much, Teresa whispered. It's perfect, Riley shouted, already running through the rooms. I want you to feel at home here, Margaret said. This is your house too. Pick whatever rooms you want. Decorate however you like. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Let me use it to make people happy. So they moved in. Teresa and Riley took 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, connected by a jack-in Jill bathroom that made Riley squeal with delight. Margaret took the master suite on the 1st floor, modified with safety features and medical equipment. The nurses had rooms on the 3rd floor, and there was still space left over. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Teresa was used to small spaces and making do. Now she had more room than she knew what to do with. Riley adapted faster, making friends in the new neighborhood and starting at a private school that challenged her in ways her old school never had. Margaret had good days and bad days. On good days, she remembered who everyone was and could hold normal conversations. She'd sit with Riley and help with homework, even though sometimes she forgot what they discussed 5 minutes ago. She'd tell Teresa stories about building her business, though the details were fuzzy and sometimes contradictory. On bad days, she didn't recognize anyone. She'd call for people who weren't there. Edmund, whoever he was. Someone named Patricia, her mother. She'd get agitated and scared, and the nurses would have to give her medication to calm her down. Those days broke Teresa's heart. But, through it all, Riley remained a constant source of joy for Margaret. There was something about the little girl's presence that seemed to ground her. Even on bad days, when Margaret didn't remember names or faces, she'd calm down when Riley held her hand and talked to her about school or books or the funny thing that happened at recess. Dr. Patel visited once a week to check on Margaret's progress. He was pleasantly surprised by how stable she remained. It's the environment, he told Teresa during one of his visits. She feels safe here. That reduces stress which slows cognitive decline. And the interaction with Riley provides mental stimulation. You're doing excellent work. I'm not really doing anything. I just talked to her. That's exactly what she needs. Someone who sees her as a person, not a patient or a business legend. You're giving her dignity. That's priceless. As weeks turned into months, a routine established itself. Teresa would wake early and have coffee with Margaret in the sunroom, looking out at the garden. They'd talk about whatever came to mind, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. Riley would come down for breakfast before school, always sitting next to Margaret and chattering about her plans for the day. During the school day, while Riley was gone, Teresa would help Margaret with activities designed to keep her mind active. Simple puzzles, looking through photo albums, gentle exercises. Sometimes Daniel would visit with business matters that needed Margaret's attention, though these visits became less frequent as it became clear that Margaret could no longer make complex decisions. The business was being run by a board of directors now, with Daniel handling day-to-day operations under their supervision. Whitmore Industries continued to thrive, though Margaret barely remembered what the company did anymore. Afternoons were Teresa's time to handle the household, coordinate with the medical staff, and make sure everything ran smoothly. She'd also started taking online courses in elder care and Alzheimer's support, wanting to better understand what Margaret was going through. Evenings were family time. Riley would do homework at the kitchen table while Teresa made dinner, and Margaret sat nearby, sometimes helping with simple tasks like stirring or measuring, other times just watching with a peaceful expression. They'd eat together, the three of them, and whichever nurse was on duty, talking about their days. Sometimes Arthurchin would visit. He and Margaret had formed an unlikely friendship during her hospital stay, and he'd started coming over twice a week for tea and conversation. They'd sit in the library, two old people with fading memories, keeping each other company. "You know what I like about you, Margaret?" Arthur said during one visit, about 3 months after she'd moved into the house. "You don't pretend to remember things you don't. So many people get uncomfortable with memory loss. They fake it. But you're honest. You say I don't know, and then we figure it out together. What's the point in pretending?" Margaret replied, "This disease is taking my memories. But it hasn't taken me. Not yet. That's the spirit." Arthur raised his teacup in a salute. One evening in late spring, almost 4 months after Margaret had moved into the house, she called Teresa into the library. It was one of her good days. Her eyes were clear and focused. "I need to talk to you about something important," Margaret said. Teresa sat down, concerned. "What's wrong? Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine. Well, as fine as someone with Alzheimer's can be. But, Teresa, I've been thinking. I know this disease is going to get worse. I know there's going to come a day when I don't remember you or Riley or any of this. Before that happens, I want to make sure some things are taken care of." "Margaret, you don't need to worry about that now." "Yes, I do. Listen to me. I've been meeting with my lawyers. I'm updating my will." She held up a hand when Teresa started to protest. "Let me finish. I'm leaving the majority of my estate to charity, as I always planned. The business will continue under professional management. But I'm leaving this house to you and Riley. It's yours, free and clear. I'm also setting up additional trust funds for Riley's education and your retirement. You've given me more in these few months than money could ever buy. Let me give you security in return." Teresa felt tears streaming down her face. "Margaret, we didn't do this for money. I know. That's exactly why I want to do this. You took me in when I was nobody, when I was just a scared old woman on the street. You gave me a home. Let me make sure you always have one too. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll let me take care of you the way you've taken care of me." Margaret reached out and took Teresa's hand. "Say we're family." "We're family," Teresa whispered. They sat together in the library, two women from completely different worlds who'd found an unexpected connection. Outside, they could hear Riley playing in the garden, her laughter floating through the open windows. That night, after Riley was asleep, Teresa called her sister. "Cheryl, you're not going to believe the conversation I just had. Try me. At this point, nothing about your life surprises me anymore." Teresa told her about Margaret's plans, about the house, about the trust funds. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Cheryl? You there?" "I'm here. I'm just processing." "Teresa, do you understand what this means? You'll never have to worry about money again. Riley's entire future is secured. Your retirement is handled. You're set for life. I know. And all because you stopped to help an old lady on the street. All because Riley stopped. I would have walked past her too if Riley hadn't insisted on helping. That little girl has always had a gift for seeing the best in people. Cheryl's voice softened. How are you doing with all this? It's been such a whirlwind. Honestly, I'm terrified. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For this all to disappear. For Margaret's family to show up and challenge everything. For someone to say we don't deserve this. Do you like Margaret? As a person, not as a billionaire. Do you care about her? Yes. God, yes. She's become like a second mother to me. And Riley adores her. Even when she's having a bad day and doesn't remember us, there's something sweet about her. Something vulnerable that makes you want to protect her. Then, you deserve every bit of what she's giving you. You're providing her with love and care in her final years. That's priceless. After they hung up, Teresa went to check on Riley one more time before bed. Her daughter was sprawled across her bed in the room that still amazed Teresa with its size and comfort. Riley's arm was wrapped around a stuffed animal that Margaret had bought her, a teddy bear bigger than Riley herself. On Riley's nightstand was a framed photo. It showed Margaret, Teresa, and Riley in the garden, all of them laughing at something. Margaret's eyes were clear in that photo, caught in a moment of happiness and lucidity. Teresa had taken to snapping photos on good days, wanting to preserve them before the disease stole more memories. She kissed Riley's forehead and went downstairs. The night nurse, a kind woman named Patricia, was sitting in the hallway outside Margaret's room, reading a book. How is she? Teresa asked quietly. Sleeping peacefully. It's been a good day. Thank God for good days. They're precious, aren't they? Make sure you appreciate them while they last. Teresa went to her own room, the largest bedroom she'd ever had, with a window seat where she liked to sit in the morning and watch the sun rise over the garden. She thought about how much her life had changed in just a few months. How she'd gone from struggling to pay bills to living in a mansion. How she'd gone from being a single mother barely getting by to being secure for the first time in her life. But more than the money or the house or the security, she thought about the relationships that had formed. The bond between her daughter and this elderly billionaire. The friendship she'd developed with Margaret. The sense of family they'd created in this house. Money could buy a lot of things, but it couldn't buy what they had. That had come from something simpler and more profound. One person choosing to see another's humanity and reaching out a hand. The next morning, Margaret woke up confused. She didn't know where she was or who the woman helping her get dressed was. The nurse called for Teresa, who came downstairs still in her pajamas. Margaret? It's Teresa. You're home. You're safe. Margaret looked at her with frightened, unfocused eyes. Who are you? I'm your friend. You live here with me and my daughter Riley. Remember Riley? The little girl who holds your hand. Nothing. No recognition. Then, Riley appeared in the doorway, ready for school in her uniform. Good morning, Margaret. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Not full recognition, but something. A feeling of safety. Of love. Hello, Margaret said softly. Riley came over and took her hand, like she always did. Don't be scared. You're home. We're going to have breakfast together, and then I'm going to tell you about the science project I'm doing at school. It's about butterflies. You like butterflies? I do. 6 months passed in the house on Oak Park. Summer gave way to fall, and the garden transformed into a palette of reds and golds that Margaret loved to look at, even on days when she couldn't remember why the colors made her feel peaceful. Riley started 4th grade, coming home each day with new stories and achievements that she'd share with Margaret over cookies and milk in the kitchen. The progression of the disease was gradual but unmistakable. Margaret's good days became less frequent. She'd wake up most mornings not knowing where she was, and it would take longer and longer for Teresa or Riley to help her feel grounded. She started having trouble with basic tasks like buttoning her shirt or remembering which room was hers. The nurses had to help her with more and more daily activities. But there were still moments of clarity that shone through like sunlight breaking through clouds. Moments when Margaret would suddenly remember something from her past and share it with whoever was nearby. Moments when she'd look at Riley and say, "You saved me, didn't you? The day I was lost." And Riley would nod and squeeze her hand and say, "Yes, but you saved us too." It was during this time that Margaret's past started to reveal itself in fragments. One afternoon, while Teresa was helping Margaret sort through old photos that Daniel had brought from her penthouse, Margaret stopped at a picture of a handsome man in his 30s, standing on a sailboat. "Edmund," she whispered, touching the photo. "Who's Edmund?" Teresa asked gently. "My husband. I had a husband named Edmund." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "He died, didn't he? I remember now. He died." Teresa looked at the back of the photo. Written in faded ink was, "Edmund Whitmore, 1989. She did quick math. That was 37 years ago. "Yes," she said softly. "He died a long time ago. I'm sorry. He was sailing. He loved to sail. There was a storm." Margaret closed her eyes, the memory surfacing through the fog. "I wasn't with him. I was at a business meeting. I chose work over going with him that weekend. And then he was gone. Just gone. Oh, Margaret. I never forgave myself. I built the business even bigger after he died. Worked 20-hour days. Made millions and then hundreds of millions. But it was all just noise to fill the silence of missing him." She looked at Teresa with clear, sad eyes. "I was so lonely. For so many years, I was so lonely. And now I can't even remember being lonely. I can't remember most of my life. Is that a blessing or a curse?" "I don't know," Teresa said honestly. They continued looking through photos. Margaret and Edmund on their wedding day, both so young and full of hope. Margaret receiving business awards, always alone at the podium. Margaret at charity events, surrounded by people, but somehow looking isolated. A life documented in photographs, successful and admired, but lonely. "Did I have children?" Margaret asked suddenly. "I don't think so. Daniel never mentioned any, and there are no photos of children. I wanted them. Edmund, and I tried for years. It never happened. After he died, I threw myself into work instead." She touched a photo of herself at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. All this success and money and power. But no children, no family, no one to remember me when I'm gone. "That's not true," Teresa said firmly. "Riley, and I will remember you. We'll never forget you. You're very kind. But you barely know me. We know you enough. We know you're brave and generous and kind. We know you trust us even when your own mind doesn't trust itself. We know you make Riley laugh, and you try so hard to remember even when remembering is impossible. That's enough to make you unforgettable." Margaret squeezed Teresa's hand, and they sat together in silence, looking at the evidence of a life lived at full speed, but perhaps not fully lived at all. That evening, something unprecedented happened. Margaret's lawyer, a stern woman named Judith Carr, called and asked if she could visit with several other board members from Whitmore Industries. Daniel was concerned. "They're going to try to take control," he told Teresa over the phone before they arrived. "There's been talk that Margaret is no longer competent to maintain any involvement with the company. They want her to sign papers giving them full authority. But she already stepped down as CEO months before she even went missing. Yes, but she still holds majority shares and has final say on major decisions. They want that power." Daniel's voice was tight with anger. "Mrs. Whitmore built that company from nothing. They should respect her legacy. What should I do when they get here? Let them in. Let them talk. But don't let them pressure her into signing anything. I'm on my way over." When Judith Carr arrived with 3 board members, all men in expensive suits carrying briefcases, Teresa greeted them politely, but warily. She led them to the library where Margaret was sitting with Riley, the two of them working on a jigsaw puzzle. "Margaret," Judith said, her voice professionally friendly but with an edge underneath. "It's good to see you. You're looking well." Margaret looked up, confusion crossing her face. "Do I know you? I'm Judith Carr, your lawyer. We've worked together for 20 years. She glanced at the men with her, a look of satisfaction crossing her face. This was what they'd hoped for, clear evidence of Margaret's cognitive decline. "Oh, I'm sorry. I don't remember." Margaret's voice was small. "That's quite all right. We understand you've been unwell. That's actually why we're here. We need to discuss some business matters and get your signature on a few documents that will make things easier for everyone." Riley, sensing something wrong, moved closer to Margaret. "Are you upsetting her?" "Of course not, dear. This is just business. Adult business. Judith's smile was condescending. Maybe you should come back when Daniel is here, Teresa suggested. This doesn't concern Mr. Morrison. This is between the board and Mrs. Whitmore. Judith pulled papers from her briefcase. Margaret, these documents simply transfer operational control of Whitmore Industries to the board of directors. It's really just a formality, making official what's already happening in practice. Margaret reached for the papers, but her hands shook. She tried to read the legal language, but the words wouldn't make sense. Frustrated tears formed in her eyes. I don't understand this. You don't need to understand it. Just trust us and sign. We've always had your best interests at heart. No. Riley stood up, putting herself between Margaret and the lawyers. You're trying to trick her. My mama says people who rush you into signing things are usually trying to cheat you. One of the board members laughed. Young lady, this is a multi-billion-dollar company, not a lemonade stand. The adults need to handle this. She's still an adult, Riley pointed at Margaret. She's still a person, and she doesn't want to sign your stupid papers. Riley. Teresa started, but she was also proud of her daughter's fierce protectiveness. I'm calling Daniel, Teresa said, pulling out her phone. That won't be necessary, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see an elderly man with white hair standing there, leaning on a cane. It was Arthur Chun, who had arrived for his usual tea time with Margaret. Mr. Chun, Judith said, her tone changing to respectful wariness. I wasn't aware you were involved in Mrs. Whitmore's affairs. I'm not involved in her business. I'm involved in her life. There's a difference. Arthur walked slowly into the room, his age-spotted hands gripping his cane, but his eyes sharp and alert. I know who you are, Miss Carr. And I know you, Jameson, from the banking sector. And you, Pritchard, from the acquisition deal last year. You're all very accomplished business people. But let me tell you something from someone who's been in business longer than any of you have been alive. There's a difference between shrewd business and taking advantage of a vulnerable person. We're not taking advantage, Judith protested. We're trying to protect the company Margaret built. By pressuring her to sign documents she can't understand while her condition makes her legally vulnerable? That's exploitation dressed up in a suit. Arthur sat down next to Margaret, who seemed to relax with his presence. I may be old, and I may not remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I remember honor. And this isn't it. Just then, Daniel burst through the front door, slightly out of breath. Stop. Don't sign anything, Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Morrison, Judith said icily. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me greatly. I'm Mrs. Whitmore's executive assistant and power of attorney for healthcare decisions. And I'm telling you that she's not signing anything today. We have a fiduciary responsibility to the company and its shareholders. And I have a responsibility to Mrs. Whitmore as a person. Daniel moved to stand next to Teresa. If the board needs operational authority, we can arrange a proper meeting with Mrs. Whitmore's doctors present to assess her capacity. We can have independent lawyers review the documents. We can do this the right way, with respect and transparency. But we're not doing it like this, ambushing her in her own home. The board members exchanged looks. Judith carefully put the papers back in her briefcase. Very well. We'll arrange a formal meeting. But this is urgent business that can't be delayed indefinitely. Then, we'll handle it with appropriate urgency and appropriate care. Good day, Miss Carr. After they left, Margaret started crying quietly. Riley climbed into her lap, despite being almost too big for it, and hugged her tightly. It's okay. We won't let them be mean to you. I don't understand what's happening, Margaret said. I built something. I know I built something important. But I can't remember what it is or why it matters. All I know is that these people want to take it from me. They want to run your company, Daniel explained gently. And, honestly, Mrs. Whitmore, they should run it. You can't anymore. But they should ask properly, with respect, not try to trick you. I don't care about the company, Margaret said. I don't even remember what we made. Widgets? Gadgets? Something manufactured. But it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is this. She gestured around the room at Riley, Teresa, Arthur, Daniel. People who care. That's all I have left. That's all any of us really have. Arthur raised his teacup, which Teresa had brought him earlier, to the things that matter. They all raised imaginary cups, and toasted to nothing and everything. Over the next few weeks, Daniel worked with a team of lawyers and doctors to properly assess Margaret's capacity and arrange a legitimate transfer of business authority to the board. Margaret, on a relatively clear day, agreed to sign the necessary papers with full understanding that she was giving up control of the company she'd built. "It's just a company," she told Teresa. "I spent 40 years treating it like it was my child. But now I can't even remember most of those years. What's real is Riley's laughter. What's real is your friendship. What's real is Arthur coming for tea and telling me the same stories over and over, and me enjoying them each time like I've never heard them before. That's what I want to hold on to for as long as I can." The formal signing happened at the house, with witnesses and notaries and Margaret's personal physician present to attest to her understanding of what she was agreeing to. She signed away billions of dollars of control and seemed relieved when it was done. "Now they can't bother me anymore," she said. "Now I can just be an old woman living with her family." That word, family, it came so naturally now. As fall deepened into winter, Riley's 10th birthday approached. She wanted a simple party with just a few friends from school, but Margaret had other ideas. On one of her clear mornings, she pulled Teresa aside. "I want to throw Riley a real party. A princess party at the house with everything a little girl could dream of. I want to give her one perfect day while I still remember why it's important." "Margaret, you don't have to do that. Please, let me do this. How many birthdays do I have left where I'll know why we're celebrating? Let me make this one count." So they planned a party that was both extravagant and heartfelt. Margaret insisted on being involved in every detail, working with Teresa to choose decorations, plan activities, and select the menu. On days when her memory failed, Teresa would gently remind her what they were planning and why, and Margaret would smile and continue as if she'd known all along. The day of the party, the house was transformed into a winter wonderland. White lights sparkled everywhere. There was a professional face painter, a balloon artist, and a magician. Riley's classmates arrived in their party dresses, eyes wide at the magnificence of it all. But the best part was watching Margaret with the children. She sat in an ornate chair that Riley had declared her throne, and the children would come up one by one to tell her things or show her their painted faces or ask her questions. Margaret didn't always remember the right responses, but she was genuinely interested in each child, asking them about themselves, complimenting their dresses, laughing at their jokes. Riley, wearing a princess dress that Margaret had bought for her, spent most of the party staying close to Margaret, introducing her to each friend. "This is Margaret. She's my special grandmother. She's teaching me that being kind is more important than being rich, even though she's both." Teresa stood back and watched it all, tears in her eyes. This was what love looked like. This was what family meant. Not blood or legal documents or tradition, but choice. Choosing to care for someone. Choosing to include someone in your life. Choosing to see the person behind the diagnosis or the bank account or the circumstances. Arthur was there too, of course, dressed in a suit for the occasion. He charmed the children with magic tricks he remembered from his own childhood and told them stories about growing up in a different time. The children listened, fascinated by this window into history from someone who'd actually lived it. As the party wound down and parents came to collect their children, Riley opened her presents. There were dolls and games and books from her friends. But the last present was from Margaret, a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a locket on a silver chain. Riley opened it to find 2 small photos, one of her and Teresa and one of Margaret. "So you'll always remember this year," Margaret said softly. "The year we became a family." Riley threw her arms around Margaret, nearly knocking her over. "I'll never forget. I promise I'll never forget." "You might," Margaret said, smoothing Riley's hair. "Memories fade for everyone, not just sick old ladies. But that's okay. That's why we take pictures and why we make moments count. Not so we can remember every detail, but so we can remember how we felt. And right now, I feel loved. I want you to remember that feeling, even if you forget everything else." That night, after all the guests had gone and Riley had fallen asleep clutching her new locket, Margaret and Teresa sat in the library. Margaret was tired but happy, more lucid than she'd been in days. "Thank you for today," Margaret said. for letting me be part of Riley's Lee. Winter settled over Chicago with its usual harshness, but inside the house on Oak Park, warmth prevailed. The holidays came and went with quiet celebrations. Margaret had more bad days than good ones now. Some mornings she would wake up and think she was a young woman again, confused about where Edmund had gone. Other mornings she wouldn't speak at all, just staring out the window at the snow-covered garden with distant eyes. But Riley had learned to reach her even on the worst days. The 10-year-old would climb into bed next to Margaret and just hold her hand, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, just being present. It was remarkable how a child's intuitive compassion could do what medicine and therapy could not. Remind Margaret that she was not alone. Daniel visited regularly, bringing news about the company and handling the practical matters of Margaret's vast estate. One cold January afternoon, he came with unusual news. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, speaking slowly and clearly as he'd learned to do. "There's a reporter from the Chicago Tribune who wants to interview you. She's writing a story about your disappearance last year and how you were found. I wanted to ask your permission before telling her no." Margaret looked confused. "A story about me? About the day Riley found you on the street? About how you went from being lost and homeless to finding a new family? The reporter thinks it's an inspiring story." "I don't remember being homeless," Margaret said quietly. "I know, but it happened. And the way Riley and Teresa helped you, that's worth sharing. But only if you're comfortable with it." Teresa, who was sitting nearby, spoke up. "I don't think it's a good idea. Margaret's been through enough. She doesn't need reporters poking into her life." But Riley, who had been listening from the doorway, had a different thought. Maybe people need to hear the story. Maybe there are other old people out there who are lost and scared. And maybe if people hear about Margaret, they'll pay more attention. They'll stop walking past people who need help. Everyone looked at the 10-year-old, surprised by her wisdom. "That's a very mature perspective," Daniel said. "I learned it from Margaret. She always says that if you have the power to help people, you should use it." Margaret smiled, even though she didn't fully understand what they were discussing. But she trusted Riley. If Riley thinks we should do it, then we should do it. The interview was scheduled for the following week. The reporter, a woman named Sandra Martinez, came to the house on a gray Thursday afternoon. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put everyone at ease. They sat in the living room, Margaret in her favorite chair with Riley next to her, Teresa on the couch, and Daniel standing nearby. Sandra set up a recording device and opened her notebook. "Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for agreeing to talk with me. I know this must be difficult." Margaret looked at her with uncertain eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't always remember things well." "That's okay. I'm here to learn about your story. Can you tell me what you remember about the day you went missing?" "I don't remember that day. I'm told I walked out of my home and got lost. But it's all blank to me. What do you remember?" Margaret thought hard, her face scrunching with concentration. "I remember being scared. I remember people walking past me like I was invisible. I remember being so hungry and so cold and so alone. And then," she looked at Riley, and her face softened. "Then I remember a little girl taking my hand." Riley squeezed Margaret's hand now, just like she had that first day. Sandra turned to Riley. "You're the one who found Mrs. Whitmore?" "Yes, ma'am. She had fallen on the sidewalk, and everyone was walking around her like she wasn't even there. It made me sad, so I stopped to help her." "Why did you stop when no one else did?" Riley thought about this. "My mama taught me to treat everyone with kindness, especially people who look like they need help. Margaret looked like she needed help, so I helped her. It's not complicated. But do you understand how unusual that is? Most people, even adults, wouldn't have stopped. That's what's wrong with the world then. If seeing someone who needs help doesn't make you want to help them, what kind of person are you?" Sandra smiled. "You're a remarkable young lady." She turned to Teresa. "Ms. Johnson, can you tell me about the decision to take Mrs. Whitmore in? That must have been a difficult choice." Teresa nodded. "It was terrifying, honestly. I'm a single mother. We didn't have much. Taking in a stranger, especially one who was clearly unwell, it went against every practical instinct I had. But Riley was so insistent, and when I looked at Margaret, I saw someone's grandmother. Someone's mother. I thought about my own grandmother and how I hadn't been there for her enough at the end of her life. I thought about what I would want someone to do if it was my mother in that situation, and I just couldn't walk away. You had no idea she was wealthy? None. She was wearing rags. She looked like she'd been on the streets for weeks, which she had been. The money had nothing to do with why we helped her. But the money changed your life. Yes, but not in the way you might think. Teresa looked at Margaret with affection. The money gave us security, which is wonderful. But what really changed our lives was the relationship. Margaret became family. She gave Riley a grandmother figure. She gave me a friend. She gave us both purpose. The money was just details. Sandra spent 2 hours with them, asking questions and taking notes. She asked about Margaret's business career, about her diagnosis, about the life they'd built together in the house. She asked Arthur, who had arrived for his regular visit, about his friendship with Margaret. She doesn't always remember who I am, Arthur said. Some days she thinks I'm someone from her past. Some days she doesn't recognize me at all. But I still come because on the days she does remember, she lights up. And even on the days she doesn't, I think somewhere deep down she knows she's safe with me. We're both old. We both forget things. We understand each other. Before Sandra left, she asked one final question. Mrs. Whitmore, if you could give advice to people reading this article, what would you say? Margaret was quiet for a long time, her mind working slowly through the fog. Finally, she spoke, and her words were surprisingly clear. I would say that I spent 40 years building an empire. I made hundreds of millions of dollars. I won awards and recognition and respect. But none of that saved me when I needed saving. A little girl with a kind heart saved me. A woman with barely enough to support herself gave me shelter. An old man comes to drink tea with me even though I can't remember his name half the time. That's what matters. Not money or success or power. Just people being kind to each other. Just people seeing each other as human beings worthy of love and dignity. She paused, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. I forgot everything. My entire life, all my memories, all my accomplishments gone. But I found something more valuable. I found love. I found family. I found home. If I could do it all over again, I would skip the business empire and go straight to this. The article ran on the front page of the Sunday Tribune 2 weeks later. The headline read, "The Billionaire Who Lost Everything and Found What Matters, a Story of Alzheimer's, Kindness, and Unexpected Family." Sandra Martinez had written beautifully, capturing not just the facts but the heart of the story. She described Margaret's rise in the business world, her lonely years after losing her husband, her diagnosis, and disappearance. But, most of all, she wrote about Riley's compassion, Teresa's courage, and the family they had built together. The response was overwhelming. The newspaper received hundreds of letters and emails from readers. People shared their own stories of helping strangers or being helped by strangers. Donations poured into Alzheimer's research foundations. Several readers tracked down homeless elderly people in their neighborhoods and connected them with social services. But perhaps the most touching response came from a woman named Patricia Chambers, who reached out to Daniel through the newspaper. "I knew Margaret," her letter said. "We were best friends in college, roommates actually. We lost touch after she got married and threw herself into building her business. I tried to reconnect over the years, but she was always too busy. I saw the article, and I need to see her. Please, even if she doesn't remember me, I need to see her." Daniel arranged the visit carefully. Patricia, now in her late 70s herself, arrived at the house on a Saturday morning. She was elegant and well-dressed, but her hands shook as Teresa led her to the sunroom where Margaret was sitting with Riley, working on a coloring book. "Margaret," Patricia said softly. Margaret looked up. For a moment there was nothing. Then something flickered in her eyes. "Patricia? Patty. Oh my God, you remember me." Patricia rushed forward and knelt beside Margaret's chair, taking her hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let us drift apart. I should have tried harder to stay in your life. We were friends," Margaret said slowly, the memory surfacing like a bubble rising through water. "We shared an apartment. You always left your dishes in the sink." Patricia laughed through her tears. Yes, I did. And you would get so annoyed. You were always so organized, and I was a mess. You made me laugh. I remember that. You made everything funny." They spent the morning together, Patricia telling stories from their college days, some of which Margaret remembered, and some she didn't. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the thread of friendship that decades and disease hadn't completely severed. "Why didn't you come find me before?" Margaret asked during a moment of clarity. "After Edmund died, I was so alone." "Where were you?" "I tried, Margaret. I called your office dozens of times. I sent letters. But you never responded. Your assistant said you were too busy for personal calls. Eventually, I stopped trying. I thought you didn't want me in your life anymore." "I don't remember that. But it sounds like something I would do. I pushed everyone away after Edmund died. I thought if I worked hard enough, I wouldn't feel the pain. But all I did was make the loneliness worse. You have people now, though. You have Teresa and Riley. You have this beautiful home. You're not alone anymore." "No," Margaret agreed, smiling at Riley, who was listening to everything with serious eyes. "I'm not alone anymore." Patricia became a regular visitor after that, coming twice a week to sit with Margaret. Sometimes they would look at old photo albums that Patricia had brought from her own collection. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, two old women who had known each other when they were young and full of dreams. As winter turned to spring, Margaret's condition continued to decline. She stopped speaking in complete sentences most days. She needed help with all basic tasks. She would get agitated easily, especially in the evenings, a common symptom called sundowning. The medical team increased her medications and adjusted her care plan. But through it all, Riley remained her constant companion. The girl had developed an almost intuitive understanding of what Margaret needed. She could tell when Margaret was getting overwhelmed and needed quiet. She knew which songs would calm her down. She understood that sometimes just sitting together was enough. Riley had also become something of a school celebrity after the article came out. Her classmates and teachers had read the story, and everyone wanted to know about the billionaire she lived with. But Riley was protective of Margaret's privacy and dignity. "She's not a story," Riley told one classmate who asked too many invasive questions. "She's a person. She's my friend. And I'm not going to talk about her like she's some kind of circus attraction." Teresa watched her daughter grow in wisdom and compassion, becoming someone who understood that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts. She was proud, but also sad, knowing that Riley was losing part of her childhood to the responsibilities of caring for someone with Alzheimer's. But when she mentioned this to Riley one evening, the girl looked at her with surprise. "I'm not losing anything, Mama. I'm learning. I'm learning that life is fragile and precious. I'm learning that kindness matters more than anything else. I'm learning that loving someone means staying even when it gets hard." How many 10-year-olds get to learn lessons like that? Most 10-year-olds get to just be kids. I'm a kid who happens to live with someone who needs help. That doesn't make me less of a kid. It just makes me a kid who knows what's important. In May, Margaret had a series of small strokes. They didn't kill her, but they took away more of her already limited functioning. She stopped walking independently. She stopped feeding herself. She stopped recognizing anyone except Riley. And even that was inconsistent. Dr. Patel called a meeting with Teresa, Daniel, and the nursing staff to discuss end-of-life planning. "We're approaching the final stages," he said gently. "She might have months or she might have years, but her quality of life is going to continue to diminish. We need to talk about hospice care and what her wishes would be. She has a living will," Daniel said. "No extraordinary measures. She wants to be comfortable and she wants to die at home." "Then, that's what we'll do," Dr. Patel said. "We'll keep her comfortable. We'll manage her pain. And when the time comes, we'll let her go peacefully." Teresa felt like her heart was breaking. Over the past year and a half, Margaret had become woven into the fabric of their lives. The thought of losing her was almost unbearable. That night, after Riley had gone to bed, Teresa sat with Margaret in her room. Margaret was sleeping, breathing slowly and evenly. She looked peaceful. Teresa held her hand and talked to her, even though she didn't know if Margaret could hear. "You changed our lives, you know that? Riley and I were getting by, but we weren't thriving. We were surviving. Then, you came into our world, and everything got better. Not because of the money, though that helped, but because you taught us what it means to be family. You taught us that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice and love and showing up for each other." She wiped away tears. I don't want to lose you. Riley doesn't want to lose you. But I know we're going to. And when we do, I promise we'll remember you. We'll tell your story. We'll make sure people know that Margaret Eleanor Whitmore was more than a business legend. She was a woman who got lost and found her way home. She was a woman who learned what really mattered just in time. Margaret's eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were unfocused, but then they cleared and she looked directly at Teresa. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. For not walking past. Oh, Margaret. Teresa leaned forward and kissed her forehead. Thank you for letting us love you. Summer came with its warmth and long days. Margaret spent most of her time in bed now, occasionally wheeled out to the garden when the weather was perfect. Arthur still visited, though Margaret no longer knew who he was. He would sit by her bed and tell her stories anyway, holding her hand, keeping vigil. Patricia came every day now, taking a leave of absence from her own life to be there for the friend she'd lost so long ago. She would read to Margaret, play soft music, brush her hair gently. Acts of love for someone who could no longer acknowledge them, but whose presence she treasured anyway. She wanted to be a doctor now, inspired by watching the medical team care for Margaret. She wanted to help people the way they had helped her friend. On a warm evening in late July, almost exactly 2 years after Riley had first taken Margaret's hand on that Chicago street, the household gathered around Margaret's bed. She had been declining rapidly for days, and Dr. Patel had said it would be soon. Teresa sat on one side of the bed, holding Margaret's left hand. Riley sat on the other side, holding her right hand. Daniel stood at the foot of the bed. Patricia sat in the corner, crying quietly. Arthur was there too, in a wheelchair now, his own health failing but determined to be present. The night nurse stood by, ready to help with whatever was needed. Margaret's breathing was shallow and irregular. Her eyes were closed. She hadn't spoken in 3 days. But she was still there, holding on. Riley leaned close to Margaret's ear. It's okay, Margaret. You don't have to be scared. We're all here. We love you. And it's okay to rest now. You don't have to fight anymore. Margaret's breathing changed slightly, becoming more peaceful. Thank you for saving us, Riley continued, tears streaming down her young face. Everyone thinks we saved you, but you saved us too. You showed us what it means to be brave. You showed us that it's never too late to find love. You showed us that family isn't about who you're related to. It's about who you choose to love. Teresa added her own words. You can let go now, Margaret. We'll be okay. We'll miss you every day, but we'll be okay. And we'll remember you. God, will we remember you? Margaret's hand squeezed Riley's once, a tiny movement that might have been a reflex or might have been a final message. Then, her breathing slowed, and finally stopped. She was gone. The house was quiet except for the sound of crying. Teresa held Riley while they both wept. Daniel covered his face with his hands. Patricia bent over double with grief. Arthur closed his eyes and said a prayer in Chinese. The nurse checked Margaret's vitals and noted the time, 8:47 p.m. Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, billionaire, business legend, philanthropist, and, most importantly, friend and family, had died at home, surrounded by people who loved her. The funeral was held a week later. It was a strange mix of corporate formality and intimate affection. The board members and business associates who barely knew the real Margaret sat in the front rows of the church. Behind them sat Arthur and his family. Behind them, Riley's entire 4th grade class, who had asked to come to honor the woman their classmate had saved. Behind them, dozens of people whose lives Margaret had touched through her charity work over the years. But, at the very front, in the place of honor, sat Teresa, Riley, Patricia, and Daniel. The people who had known Margaret in her final years. The people who had seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway. Riley insisted on speaking at the funeral. Teresa tried to talk her out of it, thinking it would be too hard on her. But Riley was determined. She walked up to the podium in her black dress, the locket Margaret had given her around her neck, and looked out at the crowd. She was small for her age, and she had to stand on a step stool to reach the microphone. But her voice was clear and strong. Most of you knew Margaret as a business leader or a philanthropist or a rich person. But I knew her as my friend. I knew her as someone who was scared and lost and needed help. I knew her as someone who couldn't remember her own name, but who remembered how to be kind. I knew her as someone who taught me that what matters in life isn't what you accomplish or how much money you make. What matters is how you treat people. What matters is love. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. Margaret asked me to read this if anything happened to her. She wrote it on one of her last good days. She wanted you all to hear it. Riley began to read, her voice wavering but determined. To everyone at my funeral. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I probably don't remember writing this. That's the cruel thing about Alzheimer's. It takes your memories and leaves you wondering who you even were. But I want you to know something. In my last years, I finally learned how to live. I learned that loving people is more important than impressing them. I learned that being vulnerable is not weakness, but strength. I learned that family is built through choice and action, not blood and obligation. I spent most of my life chasing success and running from pain. I built an empire, but I lived in loneliness. Then, disease took everything from me, and in losing everything, I found what I'd been missing all along. Riley and Teresa saved me. Not just my life, but my soul. They showed me what unconditional love looks like. They taught me that I was worthy of care even when I could give nothing back. They made me part of their family when I had nothing to offer but a confused old woman who needed help. So here's what I want you to remember. Don't wait until you lose everything to discover what matters. Don't walk past people who need help. Don't let your life become so busy with achievement that you forget to build connections. Don't let fear of vulnerability keep you from loving deeply. And if you see someone who is lost, scared, alone, stop. Reach out your hand. You might just save them. Or they might save you. Because that's the secret I learned too late. We save each other. I may not remember writing this. I may not remember most of my life. But I know this. In my final years, I was loved. I was seen. I was home. And that's the only thing that matters when the lights go out. Be kind. Choose love. See the humanity in everyone you meet. That's how you build a life worth remembering, even if you eventually forget it. With love and gratitude, Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. By the time Riley finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. People who had known Margaret as a hard-driving businesswoman were seeing her in a completely different light. The story of her transformation, from isolated billionaire to beloved family member, touched something deep in everyone present. After the funeral, people came up to Teresa and Riley, sharing their own memories of Margaret from her business years. They painted a picture of a brilliant but lonely woman, someone who commanded respect but had kept everyone at arm's length. Learning about her final years, about how she'd opened her heart and found family, gave new meaning to her entire life story. In the weeks after Margaret's death, life slowly returned to a new normal. The house felt empty without her presence. Riley would sometimes forget and start to tell Margaret something before remembering she was gone. Teresa would hear a sound and think it was Margaret needing help, only to realize it was just the house settling. But they had each other, and they had the lessons Margaret had taught them, and they had the security she'd provided, allowing them to grieve without the additional stress of financial worry. Margaret's will was read, and, as she'd promised, the house was left to Teresa and Riley, along with trust funds for Riley's education and Teresa's retirement. The bulk of her estate went to charities, including a newly established foundation focused on Alzheimer's research and supporting families caring for loved ones with dementia. But there was one final surprise. Margaret had left instructions for an annual scholarship program to be established at Riley's school. It would provide full scholarships to students who demonstrated exceptional kindness and compassion, not just academic achievement. The scholarship was named the Edmund Whitmore Memorial Award, after the husband Margaret had lost so long ago, connecting her past love with the love she'd found at the end. 1 year after Margaret's death, on the anniversary of that first day when Riley had taken her hand on the street, a ceremony was held at the house. The mayor came, along with representatives from various charities Margaret had supported. A plaque was unveiled in the garden, in memory of Margaret Eleanor Whitmore 1946 to 2024, who taught us that it's never too late to find family, and that the greatest wealth is love. Riley, now 11 years old, gave a brief speech to the small gathering. Margaret used to say that she was lucky I found her that day. But I think I was the lucky one. She taught me that kindness is the most important thing you can give someone. She taught me that every person you meet has value and dignity, no matter what they look like or how much money they have. She taught me that family is about choosing to love people and showing up for them every day. She looked at her mother, standing nearby. My mom taught me to help people who need it. Margaret taught me why that matters. Together, they showed me how to live a life that means something. After the ceremony, as guests mingled in the garden, Arthur pulled Teresa aside. He was using a walker now, his own health continuing to decline, but his mind was still sharp. You did a good thing, you know. Taking her in, giving her a home, loving her even when it was hard. She gave us more than we ever gave her. That's what love does. It multiplies. It grows. One act of kindness from a child on a street corner created ripples that touched hundreds of lives. That's Margaret's real legacy, not the business empire. The love. Teresa watched Riley playing in the garden with some of the neighborhood children who had come to the ceremony. Her daughter was happy and healthy and growing into a remarkable young woman. They had a home, security, and, most importantly, they had learned what really mattered in life. She thought about that day 2 years ago when Riley had stopped to help a confused old woman on the street. How it would have been so easy to keep walking, to not get involved, to protect themselves from potential danger or inconvenience. But Riley had seen a person who needed help, and she had acted on compassion without overthinking it. That simple choice had changed everything. It had brought Margaret into their lives. It had taught them about love and family and what it means to truly see another person's humanity. It had given Margaret peace in her final years and given Teresa and Riley a larger life than they'd ever imagined. The greatest treasures, Teresa realized, weren't found in bank accounts or business empires. They were found in moments of connection between people. They were found in a child's hand reaching out to comfort a stranger. They were found in choosing compassion over convenience. Margaret had been one of the richest women in America, but she'd also been one of the loneliest. It wasn't until she lost everything, her memory, her independence, her identity, that she gained what she'd been missing all along, love. As the sun set over the garden and the guests began to leave, Teresa walked over to the plaque and traced the words with her finger. She could almost hear Margaret's voice, that slight tremor that had been there in her final years, saying the words she'd repeated so often. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting us love you." Teresa whispered back to the memory. Inside the house, she found Riley in the library, looking at photos from the past 2 years. Margaret at Riley's birthday party, wearing a paper crown and laughing. Margaret and Arthur having tea in the garden. Margaret and Riley doing a puzzle together, their heads bent close. "I miss her," Riley said softly. "I miss her too, baby. But I'm glad we knew her. Even though it hurt to lose her, I'm glad we had her in our lives." "Me too." They sat together in the library that Margaret had loved, surrounded by books and memories and love. Outside, the world continued turning. People rushed by each other on busy streets, and somewhere someone needed help. The story of Margaret Eleanor Whitmore and the girl who saved her would be told and retold, inspiring others to stop, to see, to help. It would remind people that everyone has a story, that everyone deserves dignity, and that sometimes the people who seem to have nothing are actually offering us the greatest gift, a chance to be our best selves. Kindness, it turned out, was the most valuable currency in the world, and love was the only wealth that really mattered. Margaret had spent a lifetime learning that lesson. Riley had known it from the beginning, and together, they had taught everyone around them what it truly means to be rich. The end. Faye, for letting me matter. You do matter. You've always mattered. Not like this. Not in my old life. I was important but not essential. Respected but not loved. I had everything except the things that actually make life worth living. She looked around the library, at the books she could no longer read, at the photos on the walls documenting a life she barely remembered. The disease is taking everything from me. My memories, my abilities, my independence. But it gave me something too. It brought me to you and Riley. It taught me what really matters. In a strange way, losing my mind helped me find my heart. "That's beautiful," Teresa whispered. "Is it? I think it's sad. Sad that it took dementia to teach me how to live." Sad that I wasted so many years being lonely when I could have been connecting with people. Sad that I have so little time left to enjoy what I finally learned. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared, Teresa. I'm scared of the day I won't remember Riley's name. I'm scared of the day I won't recognize your face. I'm scared of disappearing into the fog and never coming back. Teresa moved to sit next to Margaret, taking her hand. I'm scared too. But I promise you this. Even when you don't remember us, we'll remember you. We'll remember your kindness and your generosity and your courage. We'll tell your story. We'll make sure the world knows that Margaret Eleanor Whitmore was more than a billionaire businesswoman. She was a friend. She was family. She was love. They sat together in the quiet library, two women holding on to each other, and the moment, knowing that moments were all any of them really had. The future was uncertain and frightening, but the present was warm and full of love. And for now, that was enough. Yes, you told me that butterflies are proof that it's never too late to transform into something beautiful. Margaret smiled, even though she didn't remember saying that. That's very wise. You're very wise, Riley said simply. You just forget sometimes. But that's okay. We remember for you. Teresa watched them together, the old woman and the young girl, and felt her heart swell with gratitude and love. This was her family now, not bound by blood or legal obligation, but by something stronger, by choice, by compassion, by the simple act of reaching out when someone needed help. The day stretched ahead with its routines and challenges. There would be more confused mornings, more difficult moments. The disease would continue its slow, inevitable progression. But for now, they had this moment. They had breakfast to make and stories to tell and hands to hold. And really, what else was there? Severe Alzheimer's disease. The scans show significant changes in her brain. Her short-term memory is severely compromised, and she's experiencing confusion and disorientation that will likely get worse over time. Can you fix it? Riley asked. Can you make her remember? Alzheimer's isn't something we can cure right now, but we can slow its progression with medication and therapy. We can help Mrs. Whitmore manage her symptoms and maintain quality of life for as long as possible. He turned to Margaret. The key is routine, familiar environments, and people you trust around you. You need care, Mrs. Whitmore. Round-the-clock care from people who understand your condition. I don't want to go to a facility, Margaret said. I don't want to be locked away. That's not what I'm suggesting. You can stay in your own home with private nurses and caregivers. But you can't be alone. It's not safe. Margaret looked at Teresa. Will you visit me? You and Riley? Sometimes. Of course we will, Teresa promised. I know. Trust me, I know. After she hung up, Teresa continued her search, but found nothing useful. Finally, exhausted, she closed her laptop and went to bed. Tomorrow she would figure out what to do. Tomorrow she would be sensible and responsible. But tonight, they had given a lost woman shelter. And somehow, that felt like enough.